Brian, can you picture a scenario where Pascal Siakam and the Raptors agreed to an extension before the deadline?
Before the trade deadline?
Trade deadline, yeah.
I'd find it hard to believe, but I wouldn't rule anything out. I don't think, though, that he would take anything other than a full max extension.
Right.
Which is, with where the league is right now, you got to be very careful about paying players max salaries who may not be, max performers. And he's a very, very good player. He's been a multi-time All-NBA player, and if the 65-game rule was in effect last year for All-NBA, he might have squeezed on the All-NBA team last year, and he might have been in position to get the Supermax because he's been a very steady, high-level player. But with where the league is now, you got to be very, very careful with guys making that 30% max. So when I say 30%. The first max when you're first eligible, the one that Pascal is on now, is 25% of the cap. Then you go through that one, then you're eligible for 30%. Then the next one after that, you're eligible for 35%. I dubbed the first one the fun max because it's usually a lot of excitement about the player signing it. The player is usually younger, healthier, has big excitement. The second max, which is where Pascal is now, I call the stress max. Mm-hmm. Because you're worried about the player not signing it. You're worried about the player not necessarily being that valuable. Maybe he's had some injuries. Maybe he wants to leave, which we see a lot of guys on the second max. And so it's a classic stress max situation, and it's one of the reasons why he's been involved in trade talks for a while.
Yeah, and we were discussing it just prior to having you on, Brian, about where Masai and Bobby Webster come into play on this, who have been stubborn, in the past in terms of placing a value on their guys and not stepping off it. We saw it with Lowry a couple of years ago. I guess we saw it with Van Vliet. And yet the Anunoby deal, I think they feel like they got what they were looking for in the end. In terms of where Siakam comes into play in that, do you believe Masai Ujiri has a price that he's looking for in order to trade him and he won't budge? Or do you think the market has effectively been set by teams that are kicking tires and he's just going to have to take what's out there at this point?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to the Raptors front office, it's a classic case of actions over words. Their actions, forget about what is said, their actions dictate that they have a price and they are not afraid to have egg on their face and have a guy walk on them for nothing if it means not doing a deal that they want. Mm-hmm. And, there's some value to that. And, who's to say how much of that played into the fact what they were able to get back from the Knicks? The Knicks knowing that they weren't going to be able to get a trade done unless they met a certain price. I mean, yeah, it's hard to see Van Vliet leave for nothing, but maybe in the long run there's a value to that. And maybe that plays into the way negotiations for Pascal will go. But when it comes to where Siakam is, it's almost like a European soccer player. When a European soccer player of a high level wants to switch teams, there's a double negotiation. The first negotiation is with the team he's going to go to about what his salary is going to be. And then, and usually only then, is there a negotiation between the teams. Usually it's about just straight money. They just have this transfer fee. They don't trade players. But it's like a bilateral negotiation. That's the way it is for Pascal. You're not going to pay premium price for him unless you feel like he's going to be able to stay with your team or interested in staying. And so that's a double negotiation. If I was Pascal at this point in the proceedings, if a team wanted me bad enough, my vibe would be like, I want the max. And if you're not willing to pay me the max, be prepared to leave me for nothing. So before you get into the trade machine and work out your best Siakam trade of all time, you better know that the team that would potentially trade for him, A, he'd be willing to sign there, and B, that team's willing to at least at this point indicate they're willing to give him the max. And that's why you have a hard time making connections on this.
Well, and there's been ample reporting on that indicating that Siakam and his camp have told prospective teams, I'm not signing with, I'm not committing to you. I want to get to free agency or I want to stay in Toronto. I don't know if
there's another layer to that.
Okay, go ahead.
Layer to that.
What is that?
Well, if he's traded during this contract, he can't get the Supermax. It doesn't matter if he goes somewhere and averages 75 points a game and shoots 100% and they win the title.
Mm-hmm.
Once you are traded away from the team that you have been with for your career, there's more details than that, but I'll just leave it at that. You lose the ability to get the Supermax. So one of the reasons why he was fending off any interest over the summer is that he wanted to stay in Toronto and get all NBA so that he could have a chance to get the Supermax, which would have been, I don't know what the most recent figures are, like $70-80 million more. That's not to say the Raptors would have given it to him. But if he's traded, he loses that ability. So, that was part of the motivation as to why he was saying that and has said that in the past, just so you know.
Okay.
Well, that changes, obviously, the conversation for lots of these teams. Is there one out there, Brian, though, like pure basketball fit, forget about what they have to give out, that you look at and say, that's the team that needs Pascal Siakam the most?
Yeah, I think 76ers are interesting, but I think the team that has real interest in him and there's a possible connection there would be the Pacers. And I'm sure you guys have talked about this.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing I can tell you that you probably don't already know. But, obviously there would have to be, like, when the Knicks traded for OG Anunoby, I think they got it, without making any accusation here, I think they got a pretty good feel that he's going to be there, right?
Yeah, there's some connections there, right?
Right. The Pacers would have to get to a point where they felt doing a deal like that they'd be acquiring a player who wants to stay there. So again, that's a hurdle one. But if you look at what they have on their roster and you look at what they have in terms of what they can trade, there's a deal to be made there. Mm-hmm. Whether or not a deal can be made is a different negotiation.